Greetings, Mason Storm here. Today we're revisiting our shawarma. A couple different things I wanted to try out with it that I didn't get to last time. So this time we're going to be doing a marinade instead of a rub. So it's going to take a little bit longer to make, but I think the trade-off is going to be worth it. Stay tuned. For our spice mix this time, I have 1 tablespoon of onion powder, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper powder, 2 tablespoons of sriracha, a plastic bag for the marination process, and I got chicken thighs. And then we're going to dump our chicken thighs into the bag and then proceed to add in all of our different spices into the bag, including the sriracha. The sriracha is kind of acting like our moisture so that it's not just a complete dry rub. You could also use water or honey or something if you wanted to. I don't think oil would work very well for meat marinades, but either way, we'll squeeze out the air from the bag and then kind of zip it shut. And then we'll just kind of move the meat around and see about getting a full coverage of everything. Once this is done being mixed, we're going to stick it in the fridge. We're just going to let the marinade do its work. So we can let it marinate for 1 hour up to 24, 48 hours. Long enough to get the flavor to really sink in. The longer you marinate it, probably the better. And if you notice there at the end, I stuck in a little bit of hot sauce that had like a skull on it. That was just a little bit of ghost pepper sauce. That stuff's fairly spicy, and if you're not into spice, I don't really recommend it. And if you are really into spice, ghost pepper is usually pretty good. And once we're done our marinating process, we get our meat out of the fridge, and then we get out our little spit rod, and I'm just going to fasten on the end to it. And what we're going to do here is we're going to stack all the meat onto the spit so that we can use it in the rotisserie. And that's just fabulous. I'm going to be using the air fryer for doing this, but I'm going to be using the custom setting, so I'm going to be doing it at a much lower temperature than normal. In our last little escapade, I did it at the maximum temperature and it was fine, but I think trying more of a slow cook and cooking it longer might result in a better result. Different end game per se. Now, because I've changed so many variables, it's hard to say what was what if using a different kind of meat or reducing the temperature and increasing the cooking time. What it was that changed what it is that we were making from this time to the last. I prefer this style than before. Yeah, this method seemed to be pretty good. Especially the dark meat, I don't know. Dark meat just seems to have a lot of flavor. And you want to center your meat when you're putting it on the spit as much as you can so that it's not super off center, because if it's off center a lot, that can kind of cause problems with slippage, or the motor may not like it so much. But the more round you have it and centerized, the better. And once we get all of our meat on there, life is good. Then we put on the other side of the spit handle thing and just kind of stab that into the meat and fasten it down. You kind of want to center it as well, so I kind of moved things in and slipped around to get some higher level of fine adjustment. But it all turned out pretty good. Something I should mention too before we get this into the fryer is that when you're working with really hot peppers, especially ghost pepper, you really want to make sure you wash your hands before you touch anything related to your face. Or you do anything else that I'm not going to specify, because the burning, it's incredible. But our meat's looking pretty good, so let's go over to our air fryer and get this thing all set up. So we'll just stick it in the fryer, and we got to make sure that the little tangs on the side, that they're properly engaged so that it actually rotates. I mentioned that again because when I put this in here, it looked like it was fine, but it wasn't rotating, so I had to open it up and readjust it a few minutes later. But if you fiddle with it enough, you can eventually get it to cooperate. And anything that's going to flap around in the breeze and potentially cause a problem, just kind of cut it off and cook it a different way or something. So now we're going to set our air fryer to custom mode, and I'm going to put it in for its longest duration, which is apparently an hour and a half. Really doesn't seem that long. And drop the temperature down. I always hear that you shouldn't really go below 325. I don't really think that makes much sense, but I figured I'd follow standard issue procedures anyway and just do it at 325, and there we are. We have meat rotating and cooking. So now we're just going to let that kind of do its thing and check it in about an hour to see what we got going on. And there it is. There's our 1 hour of roasting at 325 degrees. So now we're going to pop that out of the oven, air fryer. And then I'm going to use a towel, wrap it around my arm so it's not dangling all over the place. And I'm going to use that to hold the end of the spit so that I'm able to slice it with a knife and just kind of cut off that outer layer and do a ring around the outside and just trim back the amount of meat that's on the spit. And once we're done our full perimeter coverage of the meat, we're going to stick it back in our air fryer and we're going to give it a second dose. And there it is there, and it looks a lot nicer when it's spinning now that it's not all over the place and it's a more unified body. And we're just going to let that go for another hour or so, and here's what it looks like after that. And then we're going to pull that out and we're going to start our cutting process again. So this time we're going to finish cutting it, so we're just going to cut along the perimeter and just kind of gradually work our way in till we got all the meat all cut up. You could technically do a perimeter cut, stick it in, and cook it a third time if you wanted to. That way you have more end pieces, because it's nice having that grilled texture on the meat. So however you want to do it, but either way, as far as doneness goes, this is thoroughly cooked and properly prepared. So we have ourselves our nice crispy chicken that's super tender. Oh, it's just fabulous. Shawarma is just one of the greatest foods there is. Now there is dedicated machines you can buy for making shawarma. I don't think they're really necessary. I think the air fryer does a good enough job. It's probably 90% of the way there as a dedicated machine, if there is any difference at all between the end results, but it's just a matter of kind of figuring out your tool and the best way to make stuff with it. So let me know in the comments below if you try to make shawarma in your air fryer and how it's turned out. And if you like my content, feel free to like and subscribe. And until next time, stay awesome.